There have been many names used throughout history to describe the advanced extraterrestrial species that have been on and off this planet for thousands of years. Their names have been found in countless ancient writings. Their names have been found in countless ancient writings and recorded as the Pleiadians, Archons, Anunnaki, Jinn, Nomo, Igigi, or even the Watchers. But the Anunnaki civilization is most relevant to our history. All the way back to our earliest scriptures and writings, we have seen evidence of these names mentioned repeatedly from cultures in Japan and Egypt, all the way to Mexico and Peru. These cultures were separated by thousands of miles of ocean, and yet they carved statues and figures that were all of a similar extraterrestrial appearance, which commonly represented that of a very tall being with an elongated skull. The gods of history must be realized for what they really were, and not worshipped as some higher deity we must simply obey. Countless connections can be traced back to the ancient world, showing the intrinsic contributions that these visitors made to human societies all over the planet. These sudden advancements were only possible because of the visitors' unique knowledge of the universe and monolithic building techniques. The Anunnaki should be known as the great master builders of the past and are responsible for the largest structures on Earth, such as the pyramids of Giza. This information cannot be brushed off as a simple coincidence and instead should be seen as tangible evidence for their direct influence on developing human cultures all throughout history. The most compelling evidence that has remained to show who the Anunnaki really were can be found in ancient Babylonian and Sumerian cuneiform tablets, such as the Enuma Elish, Epic of Gilgamesh, or the Atrahasis, which are only now being fully understood and accepted. These clues to the past completely rewrite the given narrative for our entire history and even religion. What these tablets describe to us is the truth behind our creation story, along with understanding who these advanced beings really were and how they have shaped our society. Did the Anunnaki really travel to Earth for gold? Some have suggested that. Whether it's true or not, when one looks into the molecular and alchemical properties of gold, they certainly find some strange anomalies. Today, most of society values gold in nothing more than a materialistic way and views it as simply an attractive yellow metal that is worth a significant amount of money. If one does some research into its unique properties, they realize that gold may be one of the most important elements in the universe, as it will always remain eternal. Gold is the only material that allows a frequency to pass through it without being disrupted. It also has incredible heat reflective properties and never corrodes. We use gold in virtually all of our electronics, such as computers and cell phones. Travel in space itself may not be possible without the aid of gold. Society is just discovering the true potential of what gold can do. It may even extend life and repair a planet's atmosphere. It shows why a civilization would be interested in going to great lengths to acquire it. Planet Earth contains the large volumes of gold in our solar system, with the highest concentrations being found around South Africa. There have been thousands, if not millions, of ancient mining sites discovered there, all showing direct evidence of metal smelting, mining, and habitation long before our history books are willing to admit. All of this information is carefully kept quiet and suppressed from society. It is no coincidence that archaeologists have discovered some of our earliest human ancestors out of South Africa. It may be a separate cradle of humankind, along with what is now Iraq and Syria. Consider where much of the war and instability has revolved around over the last 20 years. The ancient land of Babylon is still being fought over thousands of years later by the elite echelons of society who wish to control the past. Continuing on with the events mentioned in the cuneiform tablets of the Atrahasis, it states that after thousands of years of labor, the exhausted Igigi workers for the Anunnaki revolted and demanded relief. The Anunnaki head scientist on Earth, known as Enki, lobbied the council to use the primitive hominid beings they had found while surveying, known as the Denisovan or Neanderthals. The Anunnaki desperately needed to find another source of labor to satisfy the grueling work being done to create infrastructure on the planet. After extensive moral thought, it was decided to use the native hominid species as prominent workers in the mines and increase their intelligence. Through their vast understanding of DNA manipulation, the Anunnaki decided to alter the genome of the native pre-hominid species already present on the planet with their own DNA to create modern-day Homo sapiens. After much trial and error, an adequate version was created that fit the needs of the work. During the creation of our species, disagreements arose between the powerful two brothers known as Enki, Poseidon, and Enlil, Zeus, over the allowance of free will and intelligence within Homo sapiens. Enki and Enlil were the bloodline sons of Anu, which combines to form the name Anunnaki. These brothers were given ownership and responsibility over planet Earth and deemed themselves gods of everything beneath them. Enki was highly skilled in genetics, and with help of his sister Ninhursag, Isis, created modern-day Homo sapiens and allowed the ability for free will within them. We should always remember that there are two sides of every story and must move past simple linear thinking to explain everything. The original purpose behind the creation of Homo sapiens through the eyes of Enlil was to become a simple slave race with only enough intelligence to comprehend basic orders. Even the idea of giving humans more intelligence through splicing their own DNA greatly angered Enlil, and he fiercely opposed it. Unbeknownst to Enlil, his half-brother Enki ended up designing a model of Homo sapien that was far too intelligent and could rival even their greatness as a species. Enki felt great responsibility and compassion for his creation and endowed Homo sapiens with an advanced brain and higher consciousness like that of their own. This new model proved very troublesome during work in the mines because of its high intellect and constant disobedience. When Enlil found out that Enki had given humanity the gifts of their intelligence and right to free will through consciousness expansion, he was furious and promised to enslave humanity forever and never allow them to know the truth of who they are. When Enlil was chosen to be the ruler of Earth instead of his half-brother Enki, a promise that had been made for the ultimate slavery of humanity was orchestrated and carried out. The famous Garden of Eden story speaks to these decisions made for humanity through Adam and Eve and the metaphorical use of a serpent and God figure. The decision given to Adam and Eve from the serpent and whether or not they should eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil led to their banning from the garden known as Eden, which is located in Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet. The clever trick used by organized religion is to make society believe that the serpent is evil and the God figure is divine and assisting humanity. This crucial teaching describing the enslavement of humanity is written around the two brothers of Enlil and Enki, represented here as God and the serpent. In the story of Adam and Eve, God, or Enlil, doesn't want humanity to know of good or evil, but to instead live in complete ignorance and darkness of the truth. And Adam and Eve ultimately decided they want free will, thanks to the sacrifices made from Enki, known as the serpent. Enlil banishes Homo sapiens to a life of bondage and slavery, and through the creation of warfare and money, trick humanity into an eternal slumber. The overall scope of control and suppression to society all stems back from the original anger felt by Enki's gifts for free will within humanity. To avoid uprisings and understanding their true history, humans were kept in a state of total amnesia from the past. The human genome was altered so that it would function in a much slower frequency, blocking off our consciousness expansion. The double helix of the human DNA and chakra system was split apart and unplugged to prevent our awareness. This alteration of human genes caused our true potential and most of our divine gifts to be kept secret from our perception. Human beings were the perfect control species since we desperately feared our own mortality. That fear is the primary means for our continued domination and brutally violent past. Human beings are now beginning to wake up and learn the truth of this identity, which was stolen from us through thousands of years of slavery. Such a notion may be uncomfortable for some to consider, but like all great stories, ours is merely just beginning. The keys to understanding who human beings really are lies within the knowledge passed down by the great designers of our species. Evidence for this design can be found throughout the pyramids of Egypt and in nearly every significant past culture before us. Detailed artwork depicted into stone tells the story of where the creators of humanity came from. This same story is echoed all throughout ancient cultures across the planet that were separated by enormous distances and completely cut off from one another. The most overwhelming evidence that proves the existence of ancient teachers to early mankind can be seen very clearly when further inspecting the Great Pyramids of Giza. From the point of an objective observer looking at these pyramids from above, they will immediately notice that the geometric alignments follow a strict pattern, found similarly with other pyramids all over the world. Since modern history tries to convince us that the Great Pyramids of Giza were made by a relatively primitive society, the calculations and precise planning needed for these alignments would have been completely impossible. The orientation of these great pyramids on Earth exactly mirrors the placement of the stars in the Orion's belt. This similar theme can be found with ancient pyramid structures all over the planet. This integral design utilizes the Earth's natural energy centers to create a healing and knowledge center. By uniquely designing the pyramids to mimic the harmonic frequency of human beings, we can now begin to understand why the largest structures on Earth were created. These enormous healing centers were used by the ancient bloodline pharaohs of Egypt to extend their life as long as possible and rule the people who worship them. This ancient bloodline is the key to the true identity of who these pharaohs of Egypt really were. By breeding with humans, the pharaohs of Egypt were the direct descendants of the Anunnaki. Thousands of years later, this practice of inbreeding and the obsession over bloodlines shows the intrinsic need of these ancient visitors to preserve their DNA. Further evidence for these visitors can be clearly seen in the largest of these pyramids known as the Khufu, where there are two important rooms which were built called the King and Queen's Chambers. These large chambers represent the embodiment of Osiris and Isis on Earth and their worship from the human race. They provide detailed star maps showing the precise locations behind the ancient lineage of the past. The King's Chamber contains two long vertical shafts, which align exactly with the constellations of Orion and Alpha Draconis during the winter solstice of that time period. Alpha Draconis is revered as the original North Star before Polaris replaced it in modern times. Beside the King's Chamber lies the Queen's Chamber, which also contains two long vertical shafts which point directly to the stars of Sirius and Ursa Minor. These ancient star alignments honor the many realms of the gods who came from beyond Earth, and the unique symbolism found within each chamber speaks volumes to our forgotten history. The underlying truth hidden beneath this knowledge is that the Anunnaki are the direct descendants and incarnations of the legendary king and queen of ancient Egyptian culture, known as Osiris and Isis, Enki and Ninhursag. It's clear to me that because the Anunnaki and many other past cultures worship the locations of Sirius and Orion in pyramids and megalithic structures all across the planet, it's therefore likely that these beings are simply part of a greater Orion and Sirian empire. This grand hierarchy system of vastly advanced civilizations controlling those below them and an intergalactic reality hidden all around us is beyond humbling to become aware of and realize you are a part of. The ancient Egyptians worshipped the Anunnaki because of the deep truth for what their species had contributed long ago to the DNA of the human race. Developing humans were given great amounts of information from the various gods that were visiting and residing here. This crossing of human and Anunnaki DNA led to what we know of as the great kings and pharaohs of much of the ancient world. In Egypt, there is overwhelming evidence showing this forgotten influence with drawings and depictions of tall and large craniums and animal-like symbolic appearances. So much of this information has been used in metaphors in various religious texts, and stories echo throughout our history. All of these depictions were simply showing the bloodline kings and queens who ruled over human society. The Sumerian Kings list verifies the truth behind this model of society when it says, quote, when kingship was lowered from heaven, end quote, giving proof to its origins and the extended reigns of its rulers. The largest structures ever built on earth give us compelling evidence for this worship of the creators of mankind. With the flimsy reasoning given to us for the purpose of the construction of these great pyramids, supposedly as the burial chambers for the pharaohs, it should be clearly noted that not one pharaoh has ever been found in a large pyramid. The nearby Valley of the Kings was their burial site. This trick is a very clever way to lead the public away from the true purpose of these incredible structures and how they were built. The Great Pyramids of Giza are found in very precise locations across the planet and utilize the Earth's natural energy centers, which we are just now beginning to understand. Think of the medical and healing marvels that await humanity in the future if we decide to move forward as a species. Instead of always looking towards the future to learn, we should instead look back at what the ancients were trying to show us all along. Everything we need to know about ourselves can be found in the lost echoes of the past. To fully understand the entire story of us, we must now move our narrative back to around 20,000 years ago. We observe that tremendous change has occurred within human society in a very short time. Mankind is able to temporarily thrive in some places with the absence of Enlil's dark hand of control on the planet. A complete forgotten chapter of human time occurred, wiped out from our memories like amnesia. Advanced cultures like the Atlanteans and Lemurians became pinnacles of what we think of as a utopian society. Yet these advanced human cultures existed far before modern archaeology gives credit for. The timeline current history feeds to us presents a slowly developing human species still using only primitive tools and discovering fire. This grossly misinterpreted timeline is used to cover up our true history and the extensive extraterrestrial influences from the past. Whether you like the idea or not, we are certainly not alone in the universe. During this lost time period existed the ancient Atlanteans and Lemurian people, who constructed enormous monolithic structures, towering over thriving cities built along the warmer regions of the planet. All of this advancement in scientific understanding was only possible from the influences of the Anunnaki and others who have traveled here. This period of the human timeline was greatly accelerated far beyond the normal evolutionary means. We know of this information from the ancient Egyptians and the destroyed Library of Alexandria. The idea that advanced civilizations thrived this far back is laughable to most archaeologists and mainstream scientists. That fate of linearity is due to a complete lack of understanding our connections and influences all along by those who came from the stars. This time period on Earth was known as the Pleistocene epoch, when the last great ice age covered the planet. The North American and Eurasian continent were covered in up to 2 miles of ice. The enormous animals like woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers roamed the northern regions, while most of the human civilizations lived in the warmer coastal areas. The water that is present on Earth now is nearly the same amount that has been here for millions of years. During that last ice age, vast amounts of water were locked up in the ice, and this caused sea levels all over the Earth to be 400 feet lower than they are today. Many advanced civilizations developed along the coast, much like our current model is today with large cities. The human species had made tremendous leaps to where some technologies and understanding were of where even we are today. These technologies were derived by using frequency, vibration, and an extensive knowledge of the cosmos. Ancient remnants of these cities can be seen all over the Earth, submerged and forgotten under hundreds of feet of seawater. These lost cities that are just being discovered are completely rewriting our history. Today, even with all of the modern technology we have available to us, humans have only mapped and explored about 10% of the ocean bottom. Imagine all of the other incredible lost pinnacles of civilization which still remain hidden beneath the forbidden depths of the ocean. It can be easy to simply pretend that all of this is just science fiction and an elaborate story in order to avoid the difficulties that come along with this narrative, but we cannot look away any longer. The truth is, we don't have any more time to continue pretending. Our very future depends on expanding our awareness before we too disappear like so many cultures before us. Knowledge is truly power and is the fuel for all conscious expansion. We have a fundamental right as a free populace to not allow the hijacking of our history any longer. I intend to rectify that blunder and provide only truth. That concludes the end of this section. Peace and blessings to you all.